again being on the side of Al-Qaeda.
Okay, Gilbert, is it Gilbert? I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
Is there something you wanted to say, some input here?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the proxy war in Syria has already spilled over to Iraq and to Lebanon. The war in Iraq is only over in the imagination of Americans. Iraqis are dying every day at a pace of 800 a week since the past 6 months. The war is not over. There's a war, there's a sectarian war in Iraq unfolding. There's one in Lebanon. An attack would spill a situation in Turkey. Syria is a composition of Alawite, Sunni, and Kurds, and Kurdistan would go in flame. It would spread to the complete region. It would be a disaster. So it's not only, well, it's kind of a stupid move. Yet another one. You know, I'm just trying to look at it in a sort of a cold and cynical way. There's no good outcome. It's not going to solve anything. What needs to happen, if you care about Syria, and if you care about the situation in the Gulf, is to seek aggressively a political solution, which the Russians have been trying to do for like 6 months, and Washington has refused to do it. They were supposed to do it in September, and now all of a sudden there's a poison gas attack. That seemed to be a little bit a strange coincidence.
Right. But let's talk about that for just a minute, because to me, you know, let's not let that get lost in all this other stuff. That civilians, you know, are being gassed. I get, some people say by insurgents from, you know, paid off, insurgents, paid off terrorists from who knows where. But it's still happening.
It happened.
And it's happening in Syria.
It happened. It's interesting is that the United States tried to shortstop, actually asked for the UN inspectors to go home early. Ban Ki-moon kept them there. The U.S. has, in Obama's statement, says he will ignore the UN inspectors, whatever they have to say. And even though there's no UN official body counters, somehow the United States has come up with a statistic of 1,429 dead, 426 children. And Stuart Littlewood in England pointed out, that's very interesting. That's almost the same, but actually more than the number of people and number of children killed by Israel in Operation Cast Lead in Gaza. Now, where does Israel, in 2008, 2009, where does the United States come up with these statistics when no international organization is on the ground doing any body counting? Doctors Without Borders said 355. Doctors Without Borders are not pro-Assad. So suddenly the United States has all this information, but they're not telling us where the sources is.
And what would be the strategic advantage for Assad regime to use chemical weapons?
None at all.
Yeah.
And people were saying it's totally insane. And there's not a single Middle East commentator, journalists who work there, and none of them like Assad, believe me. They all say, what could be more insane for when you have UN inspectors on the ground to examine chemical weapon attacks, to launch a chemical weapon attack within minutes of where these inspectors are staying. And then the United States said, well, they should leave because unless they examine the grounds immediately, they won't find out information. Well, that's not true. This residue stays a long time. There have been pictures on, you could see on the video screens of these weapons, homemade kind of amateur weapons that were smuggled in. They're not something that the government would use to launch an attack. And
are they in pressure cookers by any chance?
Pardon?
Are they pressure cooker bombs?
Pressure cooker bombs?
No. I don't think so, but...
No.
They were apparently launched in rockets And what seems to be the situation here, from an information that I got yesterday from somebody in Syria, is that the rockets were coming from an area controlled by the rebels. So everything seems to be pointing that direction. However, there's no way to prove anything. And there will never any way to prove anything. So it's really an issue of, because, in case the listeners are not aware of it, and they should be, so far the death toll in Iraq is 100,000 people have died in the past 2 years in this horrible civil war, and which has turned into a proxy war, and there's more than 3 million refugees. And that is the problem that has to be stopped, and the only way to do it is through a political solution to have all parties, including Assad, including the regional player, namely Iran and Saudi Arabia, and the big power at the same table in Geneva, which is what Russia wants.
And actually, Gilbert, you've written a piece about this political solution in Syria for your paper, the News Junkie Post, titled "NATO's Assault on Syria: A Crime and a Mistake." You talk about this Balkanization of Syria. Is that the right term?
I have talked about Balkanization of Syria, which is never a great solution, but it was a solution that ended up sort of working for former Yugoslavia in the 90s. Between, Yugoslavia used to be Serbia, Bosnia, Kosovo, and it could work. I floated that notion about 9 months ago. It could be a workable solution, and it's very likely to be sort of a de facto solution in Syria anyway. Because I personally and unfortunately do not think that the three main sectarian group, Alawites, Sunnis, and Kurds, will ever be able to reconcile. I think that would be sort of a pipe dream. So doing a federation, a loose federation, might be the way to go. And it's sort of, for anybody that knows the geography of Syria, and they can check, some of my very long series of articles on Syria, they'll realize that the country it would be pretty easy to do a partition between the region, because they already the Alawites live in the area which is the coast area, which is Latakia province. And the Kurds are in the north, and the Sunnis are sort of in the rest of the area of Syria. So it would be feasible.
Is there any way that this is a question? Let me just throw out. Is there any way that this is nothing more than a turf war between Putin and Obama?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I frankly, I don't think Obama. If Obama had his preferences, I don't think he would want to be engaged in Syria. I don't think he wanted to be engaged in Libya. There's enough problems the United States has. The Middle East has been a major disaster since the United States became involved with 1979 in Afghanistan. Of course, that's Southeast Asia. Not technically.
I understand that, but I'm just trying to think about why Obama is wanting to send our ships there, and
because
maybe it's just a big he thinks that's the most macho statement he could show.
There's a tremendous pressure on Obama from the pro-Israel lobby, which sees the U.S. which is very concerned not so much with Syria, but with Iran. And AIPAC, the official pro-Israel lobby, put out a statement in which, in 3 different paragraphs, they talked about the reason for confronting Assad is not a humanitarian reason, but to show the Iranians that the United States is serious about stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons. They don't care about how many Syrians died. It's simply that the United States does not
and
show...
also, it's a way for Israel to topple Assad, to weaken Couple Assad and hamper Hezbollah, to weaken Iran, two main allies in the region. That's the plot here from Israel.
Right, but in terms of Osama, is being pressured by them to take action, and even John McCain and Lindsey Graham, the senators, think that the U.S. should go all out in an attack on Syria, not just a shot across the bows. And more than that, there was something called the Project for a New American Century. It started.
PNAC.
PNAC, and they really pushed for the war in Iraq. Then they dissolved. They disappeared as an organization. They reappeared as something called the Foreign Policy Initiative with some of the same people. Just last week, they sent a letter signed by 73 former experts, many of the PNAC people, Elliot Abrams, Wolfowitz, these kind of people, signed this letter in which they call for Obama to launch a serious war on Assad. But they also said that if the United States does not act against Syria, it'll be sending a message to Iran that they have nothing to worry about, that Iran could go ahead and build nuclear weapons. Now, there's no proof that they're doing that, and yet no one will mention the one country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons in the hundreds, and that is Israel.
That's right.
Even the American president will not admit that Israel has nuclear weapons. And that is a big problem for the region. And until that's discussed...
That's what I've been thinking lately about the whole term American-Israeli, AIPAC. What does the P stand for?
Public Affairs. American-Israel Public Affairs Committee.
I'm starting to see that really has very little to do with anything that is pro-Israel. Well, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, Israel can be America's military base, its spearhead for all the bombs that it's going to get dropped on it due to the fact of that friendship, right?
Well, it's not friendship. It's recognition of mutual power. But AIPAC
Israel has no power without America.
Well, AIPAC
is the strongest lobbying power in Washington. They give money to Republicans, to Democrats, a massive amount of money, and
a lot of that money just like kind of goes to private hands, doesn't it? Like Kerry and McCain and their subsidiaries, the lobbyists who sit in our government. It's just a big scam, isn't it? Top to bottom, a stupid, backward, ridiculous system of just lies.
AIPAC itself does not contribute money to candidates. It steers money from what they call political action committees to candidates and from wealthy individuals. And unfortunately, there is a small percentage of wealthy American Jews who get their jollies off of supporting Israel, and they support candidates of both parties who are willing to pledge allegiance to Israel and put Israel's interests before those of the United States. And they don't represent...
But it's only to Israel as a military base or kind of a place where military money can be laundered as more weapons are, fed through there to the entire region. So it's kind of, it's a double false flag too. I mean, it's a double mind-binding thing because I don't think that it is in Israel's best interest to be the target of any